I never thought the day would come when I would choose a camera over a luxury fashion piece, but that's exactly what happened. The Hasselblad X2D II camera ended up taking the spot of my dream Chanel bag. They cost about the same, but when I asked myself what truly brought joy and purpose into my life, the answer was clear. My two great loves are scuba diving and photography, and only one of those passions actually helps me put food on the table. Photography is not only what I adore, it's also how I support my family. That made the decision easy. The camera had to come first. The story of how this camera came into my life began with a conversation about the very first Hasselblad store opening in Southeast Asia, right in Singapore. I was chatting with friends about it, including Bobby Tonelli and Robbie, and we all wondered if the store opening would also coincide with the unveiling of the long-rumored X2D II camera. For someone like me who had been shooting with the earlier X2D camera, the idea of a significant upgrade felt irresistible. As much as I cherished that older model, there were quirks and limitations I often ran up against, especially when photographing newborns. If the rumors were true, I knew I had to be there. So I made the decision. I got myself on the guest list for the grand opening and booked the flight. But it wasn't without sacrifice. To make room in my budget, I let go of most of my older gear. Cameras and lenses that had been my companions on countless shoots were sold off to new homes. If you saw my earlier videos, you might notice some familiar tools are missing now. That's because they were all part of funding this leap forward. As I boarded the plane to Singapore, my stomach churned with nervous anticipation. Nothing was guaranteed. I didn't know if the Mark II would actually be launched that day. I had no idea what the price tag would look like, and I couldn't even be certain a unit would be available for purchase. But deep down, there was a quiet certainty in me. I felt like this camera and I were destined to meet. That thought was enough to keep me going. The grand opening itself was unforgettable. The atmosphere was alive with energy and excitement. Lion dancers filled the space with rhythm and tradition, while photographers and enthusiasts mingled, their eyes gleaming with curiosity. There were hands-on sessions, and yes, even actor Simon Yam graced the event. But the highlight for me was finally holding the X2D II camera in my own hands. The moment I made the purchase, I felt like months of anticipation had finally crystallized into reality. I couldn't wait to put it to work, so I took it straight into my first portrait session. Before bringing it into a client job, I wanted to give it a real-world test. Immediately, I noticed little details that elevated the shooting experience. The graphite gray finish with its subtle matte texture felt refined and professional. It wasn't just beautiful to look at, it was comfortable to hold. The grip felt more ergonomic than the previous version, which made it easier to handle during long shoots. The leather-like material on the body had a pleasing texture, giving the camera a tactile warmth that felt vintage yet modern at the same time. The body itself felt slightly lighter in hand. While the difference wasn't massive, it was noticeable enough to make a long session feel less fatiguing. Another pleasant surprise was the new customization options. There are two new buttons, one being a joystick that made autofocus adjustments so much more intuitive. For a newborn photographer like me, where quick but precise focus is critical, this was a real improvement. The other button was bright orange, and while it may sound like a trivial aesthetic detail, it genuinely added a touch of character. Small design choices like that can elevate the personality of a tool you use every day. And yes, in case you're wondering, the camera even had that satisfying new gear smell. Once I began shooting, the upgrades became even clearer. The autofocus was significantly faster. I used the 65mm lens, which is one of Hasselblad's older lenses, and while the continuous autofocus feature doesn't function on it, I could still feel how much more responsive the system had become. Switching over to the newer 55mm lens unlocked even more improvements, including the ability to use continuous autofocus seamlessly. That gave me a glimpse of where the system is headed, and it made me want to save up for additional newer lenses to fully enjoy these enhancements. In low-light situations, the autofocus also impressed me. Where the previous models sometimes struggled, this one locked in confidently, even when conditions weren't ideal. The autofocus menu itself has become more versatile, letting you choose between different modes such as spot, expanded spot, custom, or wide. Beyond that, The subject detection has become highly adaptable. You can set it for humans, cats, dogs, or even vehicles. And if none of that suits your needs, you can turn it off entirely. For photographers who work across genres, that level of flexibility is invaluable. Another subtle yet meaningful change lies in the base ISO, which now starts at 50 instead of 64. On paper, that sounds like a minor adjustment, but in practice, it gives slightly cleaner files and just a little extra breathing room in the highlights. For portraits, where skin tones and fine details matter so much, those small tweaks make a noticeable difference. But perhaps the most practical improvement for my line of work is the new flip screen. On the previous version, it only tilted up about 70 degrees, which was fine for low-angle shots but limited in other scenarios. Now it goes a full 90 degrees upward, allowing proper waist-level shooting, and it also tilts down 42 degrees. That downward tilt is a game-changer for newborn photography. I often shoot top-down angles when working with babies, and having the flexibility to tilt the screen downward makes those sessions so much easier and more natural. As I began previewing images, the display felt less contrast-heavy than before, giving a more accurate sense of what the final photo might look like. It's still early days, and I'm curious how this will translate after editing, but the initial impression was positive. Then there's the image quality itself, which is really where the magic happens. The files from the X2D Mark II camera felt like they belonged on another level entirely. The tonal gradation between highlights and shadows rolled off smoothly, with no abrupt transitions, no harsh blown-out spots, and no muddy shadow areas. The detail was breathtaking. Tiny strands of nearly invisible hair appeared sharp and defined. The texture of denim, the pores on skin, the little imperfections that make people reel all of it was captured with such clarity that it almost exceeded what I could perceive in the moment. That's the real gift of this camera. It doesn't just freeze a scene, it preserves every intricate detail of the memory. When you're photographing people who matter deeply to their families, newborns, loved ones, those once-in-a-lifetime moments, those details matter. They make the photograph more than just a picture. They make it real. Holding the X2D Mark II camera, I realized this wasn't just a purchase. It was an investment, both financially and emotionally. It's the biggest investment I've made this year, and I made it because I want to deliver nothing short of the best for my clients. It's about giving families portraits that not only capture a moment but also reflect the richness, texture, and authenticity of life itself. As I continue working with this camera, I know I'll discover even more nuances and improvements. But even now, in these early days, I can confidently say it feels like a step forward not only in technology but in my craft as a photographer. I can't wait to keep exploring what it can do and to share the results along the way. This camera may have come at the cost of my dream Chanel bag, but every time I look through the viewfinder, I know I made the right choice.